In a soccer match, a player typically runs between 8 and 12 kilometers, or 5 and 7 miles. The speed is not constant. The style of running constantly has to be adapted to the situation. You often put in short sprints with many rapid turns. In order to run well, you will have to find time for running training. This is what running training looks like in the long term. The orientation phase, the rough coordination phase, the refining phase, and the automatic or reflex phase. You do not train these phases separately, but they gradually dovetail together. For clarity, the phases have been separated in this film, but in practice, transitions always take place gradually. The first phase is the orientation phase. This phase includes exercises meant to become familiar with running. There is no need for correction yet, only the most striking mistakes are pointed out and improved. The most important thing is to start to realize how you are running. Where do you put your arms and legs? What are your knees, feet and head doing? In order to be conscious of this, you can do all sorts of exercises in which the arms and legs are coupled and uncoupled. This makes you realize they belong together, that there is a connection between them. You will also notice that there must be synchronization between the left leg and right arm and vice versa. If you do not do this, an imbalance occurs. If you do not use your arms, you will have difficulties with your balance. You will then make all sorts of compensating movements, especially using the trunk and the shoulders. A good sense of orientation in space is needed for this exercise. By running sideways, you also upgrade the stability of the upper leg and trunk. You have to try to move correctly in all sorts of situations, even when the exercises get more difficult. The step forward has to be as big as the step backwards. The arms have to move smoothly. Turning right or left often causes balance difficulties. After the orientation phase, we have the rough coordination phase. In reality, both phases will gradually dovetail. When doing exercises for the rough coordination, you will often also have to repeat exercises from the first orientation phase. In this phase, you will gradually learn technical aspects more consciously. Each time there is one part, you will have to pay special attention to, for example, the use of arms or knees. From this skip and jump, you need a considerable knee and arm input in which the transition to running should be fluent. The hops have to be long and demand considerable knee work. Even in forced jumps, you should try to maintain the power when switching to running. Hopping is done from the ankles. In the phase of rough coordination, you will find that other things, such as heels and buttocks, go wrong again. In general, it is difficult to do different things at the same time. The ankle is a complex joint which has to be trained well. In running training, this is often not appreciated enough. If you practice a lot, the frequency of bending and stretching the ankle becomes faster and faster. The rough coordination can be practiced by running off from different positions. The stress always lies on time profit as a result of a good takeoff and support of the arms. The trunk should be kept in a forward position. In this fast dancing walk or quick step, you are playing with your body gravity. You have to make sure that the trunk is in line with the pushing leg when starting off. In exercises with a partner, it becomes more difficult to keep moving economically. In these exercises, you work on a technique training with an obstacle. Yet, you have to try to keep running economically. When you react quickly, you will often have a lead of a meter or more on your opponent. The better you are in this, the more confident you become, and the more often you will use it in a match. The next phase is the delicate coordination. As the performance of the exercises improves, you can include increasingly more aspects of technique. You should consciously pay attention to one technical aspect at a time. In coordination exercises, you always have to land on your front foot. The body gravity is kept above the supporting foot and the trunk is inclined slightly forward. The heels move quietly and relaxed up to the buttocks. Again, the trunk is directed slightly forward. You have to land on your forefoot, keeping the body gravity above the supporting leg. The arms swing along smoothly. A quick heel hit requires a little more body gravity. Here too, land on the forefoot. The knees are lifted alternately to the horizontal or higher. A clear accent must be prevalent. The arms support the knee input. In half-high skippings, the arms are swung up to chest height in an easy, fluent manner. The total movement looks easy and controlled. In high skippings, the upper legs reach the horizontal. The arms are swung up to chin height. The upper legs are almost horizontal and the trunk strongly inclines forward. This swinging, curving walk is meant to learn to use the ankles. There must be a lot of movement in the ankle joint. The exercises associated with correcting certain technique shortcomings should not be separated from each other. They all help improving the running technique. For example, 4 dance steps followed by 4 skips. Many part exercises can be followed by the total movement of sprinting. For example, sprint from a heel stop. When changing into a sprint, you have to pay attention to the following aspects. Is the trunk directed forward? Does the hand reach chin height? Are the arms bent in the right direction? Is the knee well pointed? Does the upper leg reach the horizontal? Are the ankle and knee stretched properly? Are the push-off leg and trunk in one line? And is there sufficient step frequency and step length when running off? Delicate coordination can be trained with the use of all sorts of obstacles. The things you train most are the delicate movement between arms and legs. A good knee and arm input are important, and the trunk has to be directed forward. You cannot use high obstacles until you have a good technique. The last phase is the reflex or automatic phase. In this phase, you try to teach the player to use the right techniques without having to think about it. You should only introduce obstacles when the technique is good. In this phase, this can increase to 10 minutes per training. Sprinting up a hill, too, should only be done when you can maintain the technique. Points of attention are again the arm input, the trunk attitude, the knee input, and the placement of the foot. Even more effect is obtained with extra load, but this too should only be used when the technique is good. These exercises are never done separately. You have to link the artificial exercises to functional running itself. The practice material constantly calls on the muscle and nervous system. It has to adapt quickly and effectively all the time. For example, changing a long step into a fast short step at high frequency and vice versa. Hopping, followed by a fast sprint, demands a lot from the adaptability of the muscle-nerve system as well. In a complex situation, including jumping, landing firmly, making a feint, and then quickly running off, you practice the functions of a totally different movement system. Taking the initiative often means you have a lead on your opponent. Therefore, you have to train jumping, landing, spinning, and turning a lot. Practice, including actions followed by reaction of the partner, are good training methods. Balance and the ability to anticipate can be trained by push, hop, and pull wrestles. Many exercises, including forward and backward sprinting and turning, are very typical situations in soccer. Shifting your body gravity in order to be able to make the next action is very important.
Start! Start! Ja! 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 Ah, nee. Maar even heel gedisciplineerd, hè?
So shifting quickly and efficiently has to do with your basic attitude, often from a low body gravity. From such a position, you can shift quickly into all directions. Changes of direction started with the outer leg result in quick turnings. You will still have to be able to do this in all sorts of movement situations. You must also be able to start a turn from a back-to-back walk or dribble. In general, this is difficult, but certainly very typical of soccer.
En sprint. En snel. Sneller. Doe maar. Maar je blijft frontaal kijken. Ja, doe maar, ga maar. Wel, kijk steeds. En kijk naar die volgende rond. Kijk. Kijk. Zo snel. Mooi voor. Even kijken. Start.
6 sprints ending in a sliding within a certain amount of time is very complicated, but again, very typical of soccer. You will then be able to clearly see the skills of the player. This slide, applied to a play situation, demands much quality and dexterity.
Al die ballen naar buiten werken. Al die ballen naar buiten werken.
This is a partner exercise in which you get points for touching the foot of the opponent. It includes disturbing balance and a good avoiding and attacking technique. Integration of rolling, heading and passing are typical soccer skills which can be extended into a more complex form later. Heading, making a feint and sprinting off will always, if you do it well, give you a lead on your opponent. You have to be aware of this and develop it well.
Juist tikken en anders met duik tikken.
In a match, you will often have to make short, quick sprinting actions. In that case, it is important to have good starting power and acceleration. To improve this, it would be wise to do jumping training. It is important to integrate the jumps in the running techniques training. This means that you always have to do running coordination exercises after a series of jumps. Jumping training too has to be built up step by step. Even more important here than in coordination training is not to skip any phase. Skipping a phase almost always means stagnation of performance, or injury, or sometimes both. Jumping training in a sandbox is a preparation for jumping on a harder surface. The advantage of starting in sand is that you will have a lower peak pressure. This prevents injuries to the Achilles tendon, shin bone and knee. Another result is that a good stability of the ankles is trained as well. Because your ankle has to adjust in each landing, you get a good feeling with the surface. For safety reasons, the surface should be even. The best way to train is with bare feet. Because of the good contact between feet and ground, you also exercise the propriocepsis nerves in the feet. These are the tactile nerves in the ankle ligaments which report to the brain whether you have to steer or not. The feedback for giving more or less muscle tension is super fast. In this way, little foot muscles, which are hardly ever used when wearing sport shoes, are stimulated by the surface. The sport shoe turns off the natural function of the arch. Running and jumping on bare feet improves the strength of the foot muscles and arch. When hopping in sand, you also train the muscles on the inside and outside of the legs. These are the muscles which especially care for stability in running. So you do not only train the muscles which supply force. When you do not use your knees very much, then the stress especially lies on the ankles. Alternating jumps are a bit more difficult as far as coordination is concerned. In all jumps, you also train the coordination between arms and legs. When doing sideway jumps, you also train the stabilization muscles, which are mostly the muscles in the outside and inside of the upper legs and the hip muscles. With these jumps, you also practice the flexibility of the hip joint. These series of jumps actually form the basis of the jumping training. All jumps can be done dynamically, or as shown here, at short intervals. In the so-called stop jumps, there is always a short break. This results in the muscles being tightened from a stationary position, so there is no previous stretching. In dynamic jumps, this is when the jumps smoothly continue, you do have the advantage of previous stretching. You can thus also jump farther. Stop jumps and dynamic jumps can also be combined. An important part you also practice in stop jumps is balance, something that is very important in soccer. When you have reached a higher level and the jump force has been developed well, you can increase it even more in this way. It is still a part of basic training, but at a higher level. These are difficult jumps as far as coordination is concerned, since balance is involved and you have to keep your arms in the right position. In these jumps, you are not only stretching, but also absorbing sideways movements. It is best to hop after you have often jumped in the sand or on a landing mat. The extent and quality of jumps have to be well balanced, else it is too damaging to the Achilles tendon, shin bone and knee. It is also very possible to do this in combination with jumps in the sandbox. When this goes well, you can increase the distance or raise the obstacles. These jumps belong at the end of the first phase. They are more difficult than on a smooth surface as far as coordination is concerned, and are meant to increase the jump force even more. Points of attention are the use of arms, and the trunk must be in the extension of the take-off leg. With crosswise steps, you can increase the hip's mobility. With hopping, the stress lies especially on the ankle and knee. Before starting jumping training, it is important to have all players jump test results. So in the course of the training, you can check whether work has achieved results. You cannot check whether a person can handle a lot of jump work from a normal test. This is very different per individual. For instance, a person may be able to jump high, but unable to handle a lot of jump work. A methodical approach is very important for someone with a lot of talent as well. So it is not always the case that someone who jumps well is also capable of carrying high loads. If you do not take this into consideration, injuries are likely. Testing should not be a means of comparison, but a personal starting point for the next test.
3,7 meter.
The one who jumps farthest cannot necessarily run the fastest, but it does show whether the training has been successful. It is wise to do a lot of two-legged jumps in the beginning of the jumping training. Later, the stress can be shifted to one-legged jumps. There must, of course, be a balance between ball handling and functional running and sprinting in combination with jumping, stopping and turning. Running, in which change of direction plays a part, so in situations closer to reality, so with the ball. Here, it is important that sprinting is done functionally and technically well. Playing with body gravity plays an important part in this. Slowing down means shifting the body gravity in relation to the takeoff foot, which starts the movement in the direction desired. A test of 10 times 5 meters within a set time limit to and fro, during which a pass is given, gives a good indication of technique combined with sprinting power and maneuverability. Specific structured training is a key contributor to goals.